Okay, today's Q&A is about berries, and the question is, are there any kashrus concerned with strawberries and raspberries and other kinds of berries? So the most significant kashrus concerned with berries are that they're typically infested with little bugs. Just like we like to eat them, so do the bugs. So getting rid of the bugs typically would involve some kind of a washing. Exactly what that is, each different hashkachas have their own ideas of exactly how to do it, but some kind of a vigorous washing. And that's possible. It's within reason to do that for a strawberry because they're a firm fruit. However, for blackberries and raspberries, they're way too delicate to be scrubbed and washed well. And as a result, most hashkachas don't let them be used because they can't come up with a realistic way to get rid of the bugs from them because you can't wash them. Wash them strong with enough force to get the bugs off. Now, that's for what I've been talking bugs till now was about if you want to eat them fresh or frozen bugs. I'm sorry, fresh or frozen berries. But halacha is more makel if you puree the berry first, like if you want to make it into a smoothie or into a jam, and that like this. Most hold like the following: if a food is only infested, the infestation is not too great. We call it mir hamotzi, meaning it's common. Minority of the time there are bugs in the thing. Then you can eat that food if you do a cursory rinsing and you puree it, because by the pureeing, that makes a reasonable chance that the bugs will be crushed and then they're going to be bottled. However, if the food is infested, is always typically infested, we call that muksik b'tilayim. It has more than half the time there's a bug in it. Then pureeing is not going to make it mutter, and you have to get rid of all the bugs then before you eat it. So to decide whether you could put strawberries without checking into a smoothie, or you want to give hashkacha to raspberry jam, then first you have to decide. The hashkacha will have to make a decision: is this a mir hamatzi, the infestation mir hamatzi, in which case pureeing will make it mutter, or is it muchzeh b'tolaim, which would make it usher to just puree it unless you got rid of the bugs first. Now, usually the rule is that when you dry something out, if you take something that has bugs in it and you dry it out with heat, then that gets rid of the bugs. And most assume that the same applies if you do this process called freeze drying. It's a different way of drying things out called freeze drying. So that is relevant if you have, let's say, freeze-dried strawberries in ice cream, or you eat it as is, or it's in a breakfast cereal, that we wouldn't worry about the bugs in those things. Now, just in passing, we'll mention that something that a freeze dryer is a very advanced piece of equipment, and it does involve heat, even though it's called freeze drying. And the same equipment is also used for drying out meat and fish and dairy products and other things that need hashkacha. So anything that's freeze-dried needs hashkacha just because of the equipment issues that are there. Okay, now, one last thing is that berries tend to grow on bushes or canes, as they're called, and there's halachic discussion about whether those are considered to be trees or not. On the one hand, in most cases, they meet the Gemara's rule, the criteria, that they last through the winter. If they last through the winter, that makes it be considered a tree. On the other hand, they're very different from regular trees. Some of them are very short. Some of them grow fruit from the trunk instead of from the branches. Some of them make fruit in the first year, or some make fruit only for 1 year. All these are very different than a regular tree. And Pais can talk about whether that means it should or should not be considered a tree. So most people assume, it's pretty assumed, that if you have standard blueberries, what they're called high bush blueberries, they considered to be growing on a tree. The bracha on them is very pre-8, and they are subject to halachas of arla. Just don't confuse this with what the Mishnah Berurah talks about blackberries, which he really means bilberries, where there is a question whether they should be eitz or adama. That's very different than our regular blueberries that we have, the high bush blueberries. Also, most agree that the bracha on strawberries is hadama, but there's less of a consensus about what the bracha should be for raspberries and blackberries, because their canes are much more unique than the way the other ones of these plants grow.